Detroit wanted you to forget this Mustang ever existed. Because in 1969, Ford built something they couldn't control. A machine so fast, so raw, even their own engineers called it too dangerous to tame. It could outrun police interceptors, embarrass Corvettes, and nearly killed its test driver on Ford's proving ground. The 1969 Mustang wasn't just a car, it was a rebellion on four wheels. And when Detroit realized what they'd unleashed, they buried the truth in their archives for 50 years. Until now, these are the 10 hidden facts Ford never wanted you to know. Fact 1. The Shelby Coup d'etat. In the late 60s, Ford's biggest secret didn't come from Detroit. It came from a man in Los Angeles, Carroll Shelby. The guy who turned Mustangs into Cobras and racetracks into graveyards for Ferraris. By 1969, Shelby had plans for a Mustang that would rewrite the rules: wider track, lower center of gravity, pure race DNA. But somewhere deep inside Ford headquarters, the corporate suits got nervous. The project was getting too real, too fast, too expensive. Shelby wanted full control, Ford wanted full profit. So they pulled the plug. Shelby walked. And here's the twist. Ford didn't scrap his work. They stole it. His blueprints were quietly repurposed into something called the Mach 1, a car that looked like a street cruiser but handled like a racetrack weapon. When the first journalists test drove it, they couldn't believe it was built by Ford engineers. Because technically, it wasn't. It was Shelby's ghost still haunting the Mustang line. Fact 2. The 428 Cobra Jet cover-up. Official paperwork said the 1969 Mustang's 428 Cobra Jet made 335 horsepower. Every magazine printed it. Every salesman swore by it. But it was a lie. A beautiful, strategic corporate lie. Because when Ford engineers strapped the same engine to the dyno, the needle didn't stop at 335. It screamed past 400. The car was too fast for the insurance companies, and Detroit was in a panic. Ratings determined premiums, and higher numbers meant fewer sales. So Ford played the numbers game. They detuned the spec sheet, not the engine, and told the world it was tamer than it really was. Under the hood, it was pure street venom. Solid lifters, 735 CFM carb, forged pistons, and a roar that could set off car alarms 3 blocks away. Every 428 Cobra Jet that rolled off the line was a wolf in Paperwork's clothing. The car that taught Ford how to lie so you could drive faster. Fact 3. The spoiler nobody ordered. Most people think that tall deck-lid spoiler on the 69 Mach 1 was a racing accessory, something Ford added to look aggressive. Truth is, it wasn't part of the design brief at all. It was an accident that started in the paint shop. During testing, engineers noticed the fastback trapped turbulent air behind the rear glass. Dust collected there in swirls. One designer grabbed a scrap fiberglass panel, bolted it on, and suddenly, the airflow cleared. The trunk stayed clean. Marketing loved it. They saw the chance to sell a racing-inspired option. But here's the kicker: Ford never homologated it for NASCAR. Never tested it above 130 miles per hour. It just looked fast. Buyers lined up. Within months, even non-Mach Mustangs wore fake spoilers straight from the parts bin. That functional rear wing? Pure theater. Born from a dusty trunk lid and a clever eye for marketing. Fact 4. The color Ford didn't want you to see. Buried deep in Ford's 1969 design catalog was a paint color so loud, so rebellious, that executives tried to bury it. They called it grabber green. And even the name scared the marketing team. Dealers said it would never sell. Too wild for a Mustang, they said. But in secret, the engineers and test drivers loved it. It matched the car's energy, the swagger of a V8 that didn't care about subtlety. So Ford did something sneaky. They released it as a regional test color, mostly in California and a few performance-focused dealerships. Within months, it outsold several standard shades. Drivers didn't just want a Mustang, they wanted to be seen in one. What was supposed to be a paint experiment turned into a cult symbol, the color that defined Mustang's wild heart. Fact 5. The Mustang that outsold itself. By 1969, the Mustang wasn't just a car, it was an obsession. But the success of the original model became Ford's biggest problem. How do you top a legend that already outsold every rival in Detroit? Ford's answer? Go bigger. The 69 grew in every direction. Wider hips, longer hood, heavier steel. It looked angrier, sounded deeper, and came with more trim levels than any car in Ford's history. Mach 1, Boss 302, Grande, Shelby GT350, GT500. Even a base coupe that still turned heads. But here's the weird twist. All that variety backfired. Buyers were so split between the new luxury Grande and the muscle-focused Mach 1 that total Mustang sales actually dropped. The car had gotten too good at being too many things. It didn't kill the brand, it matured it. The 69 Mustang marked the end of innocence and the start of the horsepower wars. It was still a sales hit, but the days of runaway numbers were gone. The only car that could outsell a Mustang was another Mustang. And in 1969, that's exactly what happened. Fact 6, the hood scoop that lied. Every muscle car from Detroit had a trick up its hood. A scoop, a shaker, or a chrome badge hinting at danger. But in 1969, Ford Scoop was more than aggressive styling. It was a full-on illusion. At first glance, it screamed functional. You could almost picture cold air feeding that 351 V8 beneath. But lift the hood, and surprise, it's sealed shut. No ducts, no channels, no airflow, just fiberglass and attitude. Here's the truth. The engineers built a working scoop prototype, but it whistled like a flute over 70 miles per hour. So Ford's PR team decided, block it off, keep the look, and call it Ram Air style. Buyers didn't care. It looked fast, and that was enough. Ironically, the fake scoop inspired real performance mods later. The shaker hood on the Boss 302 and Mach 1 of 1970 became an icon. So yeah, sometimes a lie becomes a legend. In '69, Ford learned something. Power doesn't always come from airflow. Sometimes it's pure imagination. Fact 7, the Mustang that shared a secret with Ferrari. You'd never guess it from the way they growled at each other on track. But in 1969, Ford's Mustang shared a piece of its soul with Ferrari. Here's the twist. Both the Boss 302 and Ferrari's 275 GTB used the same Italian-designed Weber carburetors. Ford engineers borrowed the concept, tuned it for American torque, slapped it onto the 302 block, and called it a day. The result? Throttle response was so sharp that the car outpaced. It wasn't just parts, it was philosophy. Ford didn't want to copy Ferrari. They wanted to beat Ferrari in its own way. Remember, this was the same era as Ford's GT40 crushing incident at Le Mans. That DNA flowed right into the Boss 302. Hand-tuned intake runners, race cam, 290 horsepower on paper, but every dyno test read over 320. It was Detroit's answer to Maranello's symphony. So when you hear a '69 Mustang bark through its open headers, you're not just hearing Detroit muscle. You're hearing a whisper from Italy, filtered through pure American steel. Fact 8, the taillights that broke the rules. In a world where car design had to obey safety rules and cost limits, Ford's 1969 Mustang broke both with its taillights. Most automakers in the late 60s used flat, simple taillight lenses, cheap to make, easy to replace. But Ford's design team wanted the rear end of the Mustang to look alive, like 3 afterburners lighting up when you hit the brakes. The problem? US highway regulations didn't allow sequential turn signals on standard cars. They were too distracting. So Ford's engineers took a gamble. They reprogrammed the circuit boards, slowed the sequence timing, and called it a visual safety enhancement. They got approval by inches, literally. The sequential blink became a Mustang signature, and later inspired the Mercury Cougar, Shelby GT350, and even modern Mustangs decades later. It wasn't just a design flourish, it was defiance in red light form. A small rebellion against Detroit's obsession with conformity. Every flash, every pulse, it wasn't just a signal to turn. It was the Mustang saying, "Watch me go." Fact 9, the Mustang that outsmarted Chevy's Camaro. In the muscle car wars of the late 60s, Ford wasn't the loudest, it was the smartest. And in 1969, the Mustang pulled off one of the greatest tactical wins in Detroit history. by outsmarting Chevy's Camaro without ever breaking the rules. See, Chevy had the Z/28, a street-legal racer tearing up Trans Am circuits. Ford needed an answer fast, but there was a problem. The new Boss 302 engine wasn't approved yet. So Ford's engineers got creative. They took leftover Windsor blocks, mixed them with Cleveland heads still in development, and built a Frankenstein engine that was never meant to exist. It ran rough, idled, and pulled past 7,000 revolutions per minute without a hiccup. Chevy expected paperwork. Ford brought thunder. By the time GM caught on, Ford had already homologated the car, making it 100% legal by racing standards. That hybrid 302 became a legend, proving that horsepower might win races, but clever engineering wins wars. In '69, Ford didn't just build a Mustang, it built a loophole with a gas pedal. Fact 10, the forgotten prototype that predicted the future Mustang. In 1969, while Ford's factories were building Bosses and Mach 1s for the streets, a small experimental division inside Dearborn was working on something no one was supposed to see. They called it the Allegro II concept, the car that dared to ask, what happens when the Mustang grows up? It was lower, wider, and built with aluminum panels long before lightweighting became cool. The front featured hidden headlights, a digital gauge cluster, and one of Ford's first attempts at a computer-assisted ignition. It never reached production. Executives said it was too expensive, too futuristic. But 20 years later, the SN95 and even the modern Mustang GT borrowed its DNA. Long dash-to-axle ratio, driver-centric cabin, and that signature fastback stance. The prototype disappeared after a few auto shows. For decades, historians thought it was scrapped. Then, in 2017, a private collector found it in a dusty Detroit warehouse, half-covered, but still gleaming silver. This was the ghost of the Mustang's future, designed before anyone was ready to believe it. The 1969 Mustang wasn't just a car of its time. It was the sketchbook of tomorrow.